The pilot's face drained of color as airport security surrounded him on the tarmac. Just 20 minutes earlier, he'd forced a black passenger off first class. Now he stood frozen, watching that same man step out of a black sedan flanked by corporate attorneys. The passenger owned the entire airline. His career was about to end in ways he never imagined, and the phone in his pocket kept buzzing with messages from headquarters demanding answers he couldn't give. Before we dive into this incredible story, tell us in the comments where you're watching from right now. Are you Team Justice or Team Second Chances? Hit that like button if you believe actions have consequences, and don't forget to subscribe because stories like this remind us why speaking up matters. Now, let's go back to where this all started, because what happened 24 hours earlier would change everything. LaGuardia Airport buzzed with early morning energy. Travelers rushed through security checkpoints, dragging suitcases and clutching coffee cups. Gate 17 hummed with the quiet anticipation of Flight 447 to Atlanta, scheduled to depart at 6:30 a.m. Andre Washington moved through the terminal with practiced ease, his 4-year-old daughter Zoe sleeping peacefully against his shoulder. At 35, Andre had mastered the art of single fatherhood. He wore faded jeans, white sneakers, and a Navy Howard University hoodie. Zoe's small fingers clutched Mr. Patches, her beloved stuffed giraffe, while a pink blanket draped over her tiny frame. They boarded early, taking advantage of the family boarding option. Andre had specifically chosen seats 2A and 2B in first class. The tickets cost $2,400, but his daughter's comfort mattered more than money. He wanted Zoe to sleep through the flight, and the wide, reclining seats would give her that rest. The first-class cabin sat nearly empty in the pre-dawn quiet. Soft lighting created a peaceful atmosphere. Andre carefully settled Zoe into the window seat, adjusting her blanket and making sure Mr. Patches stayed secure in her arms. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. He smiled, brushing a curl from her forehead. Sliding into seat 2A, Andre pulled out his laptop. A merger acquisition needed his review before the Atlanta meetings. Documents filled his screen as he began reading through financial projections and legal frameworks. The cabin remained blissfully quiet. Heavy footsteps approached from the cockpit. Captain Roger Hammond emerged, clipboard in hand, conducting his pre-flight inspection. At 52, Hammond carried himself with rigid authority earned through 28 years of flying. His silver hair gleamed under the cabin lights. His uniform bore multiple commendation pins. Hammond's eyes swept the cabin in routine assessment. Then they landed on Andre. His expression shifted. The professional neutrality vanished, replaced by something colder. Suspicious. His jaw tightened as he changed direction, walking deliberately toward row 2. "Excuse me." Hammond's voice carried an edge sharp enough to cut. "Those seats are reserved." Andre looked up from his laptop, confusion flickering across his face. "I'm sorry. First class is for premium members." Hammond's tone suggested he was explaining something obvious to someone slow. "I need to see your boarding passes." Andre blinked, processing the request. He'd flown first class hundreds of times. Nobody had ever questioned his presence. "Is there a problem with my tickets?" "Just show me your boarding passes, sir." The word "sir" dripped with condescension. Andre pulled out his phone, navigating to his digital boarding passes. 2 tickets. Seats 2A and 2B. First class. Purchased and confirmed. He held the screen toward Hammond. The pilot took longer than necessary examining the passes. His eyes narrowed. He scrolled through the information multiple times, clearly searching for some discrepancy, some error he could exploit. The seconds stretched uncomfortably. Other passengers began boarding. A white couple in their 60s walked past, expensive luggage rolling behind them. Hammond's entire demeanor transformed. His face brightened. Warmth flooded his voice. "Mr. and Mrs. Patterson." Wonderful to see you again. Welcome aboard. Your usual seats are ready in row 1. He gestured graciously, treating them like royalty. The couple smiled and thanked him, settling into their seats with practiced comfort. They were clearly regulars, valued platinum members who flew this route frequently. Hammond turned back to Andre, and the warmth evaporated instantly. "Sir, there's been a mistake with the seating assignments. These seats are needed for operational purposes. I'm going to have to ask you to move to economy." Andre's stomach tightened. He kept his voice calm, measured. "Captain, my daughter is sleeping. We paid full price for these seats. What operational purpose requires us to move? That's not your concern." Hammond's voice rose slightly. "I'm the captain of this aircraft. When I give an instruction regarding seating, passengers comply. Now, I need you to gather your belongings and move to the back of the plane." More passengers filed past. Some glanced over, sensing tension. A few pulled out their phones, pretending to check messages but positioning cameras toward the confrontation. Andre felt Zoe shift against him. Her eyes fluttered. The last thing he wanted was to wake her with an argument, to frighten her with raised voices and conflict. He looked at his sleeping daughter, then back at Hammond. The pilot's expression held absolute certainty. He believed himself untouchable, righteous in his authority. Andre recognized that look. He'd seen it countless times throughout his life. The look of someone who'd made a decision based on nothing but appearance and assumption. "Fine." Andre's voice came out quiet, controlled. "We'll move." Relief and satisfaction washed over Hammond's face. "Good decision. I appreciate your cooperation." Andre began carefully gathering their belongings. His laptop. Zoe's small backpack with snacks and toys. Her blanket. He moved slowly, trying not to disturb her sleep. Hammond watched, arms crossed, as if supervising a necessary but unpleasant task. As Andre stood, cradling Zoe against his chest, the pilot added one final comment. "Next time, fly an airline that matches your budget." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Several passengers audibly gasped. A woman in row 3 covered her mouth. 2 business travelers in row 4 exchanged shocked glances. Andre paused mid-step. He turned slowly, meeting Hammond's eyes with an intensity that made the older man's confidence waver for just a fraction of a second. Something flickered in Andre's expression. Something dangerous and controlled. Something Hammond didn't recognize but should have feared. Then it was gone. Andre's face smoothed into careful neutrality. Without another word, he carried his sleeping daughter down the narrow aisle toward economy. Helen Porter, the lead flight attendant, had watched the entire exchange from the galley. Her face burned with shame. She knew what she'd witnessed. She knew it was wrong. But she said nothing, did nothing, just wrung her hands and avoided eye contact as Andre passed. Economy class sprawled before him, rows of cramped seats already filling with passengers storing carry-ons and settling in for the flight. Andre found seats 24B and 24C. The middle and window seats in a 3-seat row. The aisle seat was already occupied by a heavy-set man whose snoring suggested he'd started his vacation early. Andre maneuvered carefully into the middle seat, trying to position Zoe by the window without waking her. The seats were narrower. The armrests felt cheap and wobbly. One didn't retract properly. The seat in front of him bore stains from previous passengers. The overhead bin was already full, forcing him to stuff their bags under the seat, eliminating what little legroom existed. Zoe woke up confused. Her eyes opened slowly, taking in the different surroundings. "Daddy? Why aren't we in the comfy seats?" Andre's heart cracked. He forced a smile. "Change of plans, sweet pea. This is our adventure seat. Look, you can still see the window." But you said we'd have the big chairs that go back. I know, baby. Sometimes plans change. But we're together, right? That's what matters. Zoe's lower lip trembled, but she nodded, trusting her father completely. She settled against him, Mr. Patches tucked under her chin. Within minutes, exhaustion reclaimed her and she drifted back to sleep. André sat in the cramped middle seat, his knees pressed painfully against the seat in front of him. His mind raced, but his face remained calm. He pulled out his phone, putting it in airplane mode, but not before composing a message in his encrypted notes app. Captain Roger Hammond. Employee 47,893. Flight 447, LaGuardia to Atlanta. 6:30 a.m. departure. He saved the note and put his phone away. Then he sat in silence, holding his daughter, planning his next moves with the same strategic precision that had built him an $8 billion fortune. The plane pushed back from the gate right on schedule. Captain Hammond's voice came over the intercom, smooth and professional, welcoming passengers aboard Flight 447. He sounded competent, friendly, like everyone's favorite uncle. Nobody listening would guess what had happened just minutes before. André sat in seat 24B, his long legs folded awkwardly in the limited space. The man in the aisle seat continued snoring, his shoulder encroaching into André's already minimal personal space. Zoe slept fitfully against the window, her small body unable to get comfortable in the rigid seat. The flight attendants moved through the cabin with their safety demonstration. Helen made eye contact with André once, guilt written plainly on her face, but she quickly looked away. What could she say? What could she do? She needed this job. Speaking up against a senior captain meant risking everything. As the plane climbed to cruising altitude, André's mind drifted backward through time, retracing the path that brought him to this moment. South Atlanta, 27 years ago. A small apartment that always smelled like his grandmother's cooking. Miss Lorraine Washington, 68 years old with hands weathered by decades of hard work, had raised him after his mother died giving birth to his younger brother, who'd only survived 3 days. His grandmother cleaned office buildings at night. She'd leave at 8 p.m. and return at 6 a.m., her knees aching, her back bent, but her spirit unbreakable. She worked so André could have school supplies, decent clothes, a chance at something better. Education is freedom, she'd tell him every morning before school. Nobody can take what you know. Learn everything you can, baby. Learn it all. He devoured books. Math, science, history, everything. His teachers noticed. They pushed him toward magnet programs, gifted tracks, opportunities. He earned a full scholarship to MIT, studying computer science and electrical engineering while working 3 part-time jobs to send money home to his grandmother. She died during his sophomore year. Heart attack. Alone in their apartment. He found her when he came home for Thanksgiving break. The grief nearly destroyed him. But her last words to him, spoken over the phone the night before she died, kept him going. Make me proud, baby. Build something beautiful. So he did. He threw himself into his studies with manic intensity. He graduated top of his class. He moved to Silicon Valley with $700 in his pocket and a laptop held together with duct tape. His first company, Nextech Solutions, started in a studio apartment he shared with 2 other MIT grads. They ate ramen noodles for months. They coded 20 hours a day. They built cloud infrastructure that solved problems corporations didn't even know they had. Within 3 years, Fortune 500 companies couldn't function without their technology. The buyout offers started rolling in. At 28, André sold Nextech for $2 billion. $2 billion. He could have retired. Bought an island. Lived in luxury forever. Instead, he invested in struggling startups run by founders who looked like him. Black entrepreneurs, Latino innovators, Asian American developers who'd been passed over by traditional venture capital firms that only funded people from certain schools, certain backgrounds, certain zip codes. 3 of those companies became unicorns, billion-dollar valuations that changed industries. His investment portfolio grew exponentially. By 30, his net worth exceeded $5 billion. By 33, it passed $8 billion. But money hadn't protected him from heartbreak. Simone, his college girlfriend, the love of his life, died giving birth to Zoe. The parallel to his own mother's death shattered him. History repeating itself in the cruelest way. He'd held newborn Zoe in the hospital, watching her tiny chest rise and fall, and made a promise. He would be enough. Mother and father both. He would give her everything. For 2 years, he barely worked. He hired nannies but did most of the parenting himself. Midnight feedings. Diaper changes. First steps. First words. He documented everything, knowing Simone would never see these moments. When Zoe turned 2, Andre started working again, but differently. He invested in companies that mattered. Educational technology. Healthcare access. Environmental solutions. He used his wealth as a weapon against inequality, funding scholarships and community programs across the country. A year ago, an opportunity emerged. Skirich Airlines, drowning in debt, outdated planes, and terrible service ratings. Most investors saw a sinking ship. Andre saw potential and a chance to make a difference in an industry notorious for discrimination complaints. He purchased 70% controlling interest through shell companies and investment funds. He stayed anonymous, operating through trusted executives and lawyers. He didn't want publicity. He wanted results. He replaced the CEO with someone who understood both aviation and equity. He invested hundreds of millions in new planes, better training, improved worker conditions. He raised wages for baggage handlers, flight attendants, gate agents. People who kept the airline running but were treated as expendable. The company rebounded. Customer satisfaction scores improved. Stock prices tripled. Financial analysts called it a miracle turnaround. Nobody knew Andre Washington controlled it all. He valued privacy, especially for Zoe. He flew commercial instead of private jets because he wanted her to grow up understanding how regular people lived. He dressed casually because designer labels meant nothing to him. He lived in a nice but not ostentatious house in a diverse Atlanta neighborhood where kids played basketball in driveways and neighbors knew each other's names. This trip to Atlanta was personal. His grandmother's sister, Great Aunt Pearl, turned 90. She'd helped raise him after Miss Lorraine died. Zoe needed to know her family history, understand where she came from. Andre had specifically booked the early morning flight because it would be quieter. He'd paid for first class because Zoe could sleep comfortably. He'd planned everything carefully. He hadn't planned on Captain Roger Hammond. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Washington." Andre turned. A young black woman across the aisle leaned toward him. She wore glasses and a Howard University sweatshirt, her natural hair pulled back in a colorful wrap. Recognition lit her face with excitement and disbelief. "I'm Whitney. Whitney Hayes. I heard you speak at the Tech Inclusion Summit last year. Your keynote about breaking barriers in Silicon Valley changed my life. I applied to graduate programs because of that speech." Andre smiled, genuinely pleased despite the circumstances. "That's wonderful. Where are you studying?" "Georgia Tech. Computer Science PhD track. I start in the fall." She paused, her expression shifting to concern. "Mr. Washington, I saw what happened during boarding. What that pilot did. That was completely wrong." Andre glanced at Zoe, still sleeping. "It's not the first time something like this has happened." Whitney's eyes widened. "Seriously? But everyone in tech knows who you are. In tech, maybe. But out here? Andre gestured around the economy cabin. I'm just another black man who someone decided doesn't belong somewhere. Are you going to do something about it? File a complaint? Andre's smile turned enigmatic. I'm always doing something about it. Just not always in ways people see immediately. Whitney didn't fully understand, but she nodded. Then she looked at Zoe, curled uncomfortably against the window. Your daughter shouldn't have to be cramped like that. This is ridiculous. She can have my window seat if you want. I'm in 23A. At least she'll have more room. The kindness in the offer touched Andre deeply. That's very generous. Are you sure? Absolutely. Nobody should be treated like that, especially not a little kid. They carefully switched seats, moving Zoe without waking her fully. In the window seat of row 23, she had slightly more space. Whitney settled into the middle seat of row 24 with a book, giving Andre and Zoe some privacy. Andre made a mental note. Whitney Hayes, Georgia Tech, Computer Science Ph.D. When she graduated, he'd make sure she got interview opportunities at every company in his portfolio. Kindness deserved reward. The flight continued. Flight attendants came through with beverage service. Andre asked for water. Helen served him quickly, still unable to meet his eyes. Guilt radiated from her like heat. Andre pulled out his phone, careful to keep it in airplane mode but accessing downloaded documents. He opened his encrypted messaging app, typing a message to be sent the moment they landed. Gerald, I need a complete file on Captain Roger Hammond by the time we touch down. Employee history, flight records, passenger complaints, HR files, social media presence. Everything. Also, schedule an emergency board meeting for tonight. This ends today. He saved the draft message and put his phone away. Then he sat back, watching clouds drift past the window, his mind already 3 steps ahead, planning moves like chess pieces on a board Hammond didn't even know existed. 90 minutes later, the plane descended through Georgia's humid air. Atlanta's sprawling cityscape came into view, the skyline glittering in morning sunlight. Captain Hammond's voice came over the intercom, thanking passengers for choosing Skirich Airlines, reminding everyone to remain seated until the seatbelt sign turned off. Andre gathered their belongings slowly, letting the crush of departing passengers thin out. Zoe woke up cranky and confused, asking again why they'd sat in the uncomfortable seats. Andre deflected with promises of pancakes at Aunt Pearl's house. They were among the last passengers to deplane. The first-class cabin sat empty now, the wide seats that should have been theirs already cleaned and reset for the next flight. Andre walked past them carrying Zoe, his expression neutral. Captain Hammond stood at the cockpit door, as pilots traditionally did, nodding politely to departing passengers. He'd said goodbye to the Pattersons warmly, joking about seeing them on the return flight. He'd chatted with business travelers, thanked families, maintained his professional, friendly demeanor. When Andre approached, Hammond's expression went cold. He offered the barest acknowledgement, a slight nod, his eyes already dismissing them and looking past to see if any other passengers remained. Andre stopped directly in front of him. Captain Hammond. The pilot looked at him with barely concealed irritation. Yes. I'd like your full name and employee identification number. Hammond's eyebrows rose. Surprise flickered across his face, followed by amusement. Excuse me. Your name and employee ID number. I'm filing a formal complaint about your conduct this morning. Hammond actually laughed. A short, sharp bark of derision. A complaint? Seriously? He crossed his arms, his body language radiating condescension. Sir, I've been flying for 28 years. I have a spotless record. Not a single mark against me in nearly 3 decades. But sure, go ahead. Waste your time. It's Roger Hammond, employee number 47893. The complaint department has an online form. Knock yourself out. Andre pulled out his phone and typed the information carefully. Hammond watched with undisguised amusement, clearly viewing this as theater, a meaningless gesture from someone with no real power. Helen stood nearby, pretending to check overhead bins but obviously listening. Her face had gone pale. She knew this was wrong, knew Hammond had crossed a line, but she remained silent. Hammond leaned closer, lowering his voice to a patronizing whisper that only Andre could hear. Let me give you some advice, friend. Airlines have certain standards. Certain expectations. Maybe next time, book economy from the start. It saves everyone the trouble of these uncomfortable conversations. You fly within your means, and we don't have situations like this morning. Andre's jaw tightened, but his voice remained perfectly calm. Captain Hammond, do you believe you're untouchable? The question seemed to confuse Hammond. I believe I know my job. I believe I understand aviation and passenger management. I've been doing this since before you were born, probably. That's not what I asked. Do you believe you're untouchable? That your actions don't have consequences? Hammond's amusement faded slightly. Something in Andre's tone, some quality he couldn't quite identify, made him uneasy. But he shook it off, reasserting his confidence. I believe the airline backs its captains when they make appropriate operational decisions. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a turnaround flight in 90 minutes. I need to complete my post-flight checklist. Andre held his gaze for a long moment. Captain Hammond, enjoy your next 90 minutes. Make them count. The words were simple, neutral, but something about the way Andre said them sent a chill down Hammond's spine. For just a second, doubt flickered in his eyes. Who was this man? Why did he seem so calm, so certain? But the moment passed. Hammond straightened, reasserting his authority. Have a nice day, sir. Andre shifted Zoe to his other shoulder and walked off the plane without looking back. Hammond watched him go, a vague uneasiness settling in his stomach that he couldn't quite explain. As soon as Andre stepped into the jetway, his phone reconnected to the cellular network. Messages flooded in. Emails. Texts. Notifications. He ignored most of them, scrolling to his encrypted app and hitting send on the message he drafted to Gerald Chin. The message went through instantly. 3 dots appeared immediately as Gerald started typing a response. On it. How bad? Andre typed quickly with one hand while carrying Zoe with the other. Bad enough. Full investigation. I want everything by 3 p.m. Understood. The board meeting. 7 p.m. tonight. Conference room A, full executive team. Done. Andre pocketed his phone and headed toward baggage claim. Zoe was fully awake now, chattering about seeing Aunt Pearl. He smiled and engaged with her questions, but his mind worked on multiple levels simultaneously, already planning the next 12 hours with strategic precision. Behind him, Captain Hammond completed his paperwork and headed to the crew lounge, completely unaware that his entire career was being dismantled by people he'd never met, on orders from the man he'd just dismissed. Skirich Airline's corporate headquarters occupied floors 40 through 45 of a gleaming glass tower in downtown Atlanta. The building caught afternoon sunlight, reflecting it across the city like a beacon. Inside, on the 42nd floor, an emergency meeting was already underway. Andre sat at the head of a long conference table, his casual clothes replaced by a tailored charcoal suit. Zoe was safely at Aunt Pearl's house, being spoiled with homemade cookies and stories about her great-grandmother. Now Andre could focus completely on the situation at hand. Gerald Chen sat to his right. At 41, Gerald served as Chief Operating Officer of Washington Capital Group, the private equity firm through which Andre controlled his various investments. Gerald's efficiency was legendary. In 5 hours, he'd assembled a comprehensive file that would have taken most people 5 days. To Andre's left sat Loretta Hayes, chief legal counsel. At 58, Loretta brought 20 years of experience as a federal prosecutor before Andre recruited her. She was brilliant, ruthless when necessary, and utterly committed to justice. Her natural hair, streaked with silver, framed a face that had stared down corporate criminals and won. Across from them sat Simon Cross, head of human resources. At 41, Simon had transformed Skirich's HR department from a complaint burial service into an actual accountability system. He took his job seriously, and right now, his expression showed barely controlled anger. The lights dimmed. Gerald activated the presentation system. Captain Roger Hammond's personnel photo appeared on the screen. Professional. Confident. Completely unaware his entire life was being examined under a microscope. Captain Roger Hammond, Gerald began, his voice clinical. Age 52. Hired by Skirich 28 years ago. Current salary $196,000 annually, plus benefits and pension. Flight hours logged, 42,000. Safety record, exemplary. On-time performance, above average. Official disciplinary actions, 0. He paused, letting that last number hang in the air. Official disciplinary actions are 0. However. Gerald clicked to the next slide. Informal complaints tell a different story. A list appeared on screen. Andre leaned forward, reading carefully. Loretta's jaw tightened with each line. 14 complaints. All filed in the past 5 years. All from passengers of color. None had resulted in any formal action. Gerald walked through them methodically. Complaint 1, 3 years ago, March 15th. Black businessmen flying first class from Atlanta to Chicago. Hammond demanded to see his identification 3 separate times during the flight, claiming he looked suspicious. No white passengers were asked for additional identification. Complaint filed. Resolution, logged as passenger misunderstanding. Click. Complaint 2, 2 years ago, June 8th. Asian American family with confirmed first-class tickets. Hammond questioned whether their tickets were legitimate, suggesting they might have been purchased fraudulently. Family provided receipts proving full payment. Hammond forced them to move to economy anyway, claiming operational necessity. Complaint filed. Resolution, captain's discretion in operational matters. Click. Complaint 3, 18 months ago, November 2nd. Hispanic woman, attorney traveling to a conference, first-class seat. Hammond told her she didn't look like she belonged in premium cabin. Made her produce both her boarding pass and her credit card to prove she'd purchased the ticket herself. Complaint filed. Resolution, miscommunication. The list continued. 15-year-old black teenager accused of stealing complimentary headphones. Indian American doctor questioned about whether his medical degree was real when he identified himself during a medical emergency on board. Middle Eastern couple subjected to additional screening Hammond personally requested. 14 separate incidents. 14 passengers humiliated. 14 complaints dismissed. Simon spoke up, his voice tight with controlled fury. Every single complaint was reviewed by former HR Director Milton Strauss. Every single one was classified as either passenger misunderstanding, miscommunication, or captain's operational discretion. Not one resulted in even a written warning for Hammond. Why? Andre's question came out quietly, but everyone in the room heard the steel beneath it. Simon pulled up another document. Milton Strauss and Roger Hammond were friends. Went to the same church. Their families socialized together. Strauss retired 8 months ago, about 3 months after you acquired controlling interest in the airline. I didn't realize the extent of this until today when I started pulling files. Loretta's fingers drummed on the table. Where is Milton Strauss now? Retired in Florida. Collecting his pension. Did Hammond provide any benefits or gifts to Strauss in exchange for burying these complaints? We're investigating. So far, we found that Strauss's son got a job as a regional manager at Skirich 3 years ago, despite limited qualifications. Hammond wrote a personal recommendation letter. Could be coincidence. Could be quid pro quo. Andre absorbed this information, his expression unreadable. Continue with the presentation. Gerald clicked forward. Social media posts filled the screen. Hammond's Facebook page, apparently set to public or shared with friends who'd reshared publicly. The posts dated back 3 years. Comments about certain people not understanding traditional airline culture. A shared meme mocking affirmative action with the caption, "When qualifications don't matter anymore." A rant about political correctness ruining aviation standards. One post from 2 years ago read, "Flew with a first-class cabin that looked like the UN today. Whatever happened to American Airlines serving Americans? Not everything needs to be diverse." The room fell silent. The implications were clear and damning. Loretta spoke first. "This establishes a clear pattern of racial bias. Combined with the complaint history, we have grounds for immediate termination with cause. We also have potential legal liability exposure. Any of these 14 complainants could file discrimination lawsuits. Given Hammond's documented history and the airline's failure to address it, we'd likely lose. Now here's where things get interesting. Comment number 1 if you think Andre should fire Hammond immediately, or comment number 2 if you believe in second chances even for people who've caused this much harm. Don't forget to hit that like button because this story is about to take a turn nobody saw coming, and smash that subscribe button because justice isn't always about punishment. But what should Andre do? Fire Hammond and move on? Or is there a better way to make sure this never happens again? Gerald advanced to the next slide. Security camera footage from that morning's flight appeared. The quality was decent, though the audio was poor. They watched Hammond approach Andre and Zoe. They watched the conversation escalate. They watched Andre, calm and dignified, gather his sleeping daughter and move to economy. A professional lip reader had transcribed the inaudible portions. Hammond's, "Next time, fly an airline that matches your budget," comment appeared on screen in text. Simon looked physically ill. "Mr. Washington, I cannot express how sorry I am that this happened to you. The systemic failures that allowed Hammond to continue this behavior for years are unconscionable. If this footage gets out, the public relations damage will be catastrophic. Everything you've invested in rebranding this airline, improving our reputation, building trust with diverse communities, all of it could be destroyed." Andre held up a hand, silencing him. "Simon, I don't care about public relations. PR is about managing perception. I care about reality. The reality is that Captain Hammond discriminated against me and my daughter. The reality is that 13 other people before us suffered similar treatment. The reality is that your predecessor enabled this behavior. Those realities need to be addressed, regardless of what it does to our stock price." He stood and walked to the window, looking out over Atlanta. Somewhere in this city, Zoe was laughing with Aunt Pearl, blissfully unaware that her father was waging war on the system that had humiliated them both. How many other pilots have similar complaint patterns? Andre asked without turning around. Simon pulled up additional data. Hammond's the worst by far. But there are 3 others with multiple informal complaints. 2 with 3 complaints each, 1 with 5. All complaints were similarly dismissed by the previous administration. Different excuses, same result. Andre turned back to face the room. "Here's what we're going to do. First, immediate suspension of Captain Hammond, effective now, pending full investigation. I want him grounded until this is resolved." Simon made notes rapidly. "The pilots' union will fight this. Let them. We have documented cause. 14 complaints, pattern of discriminatory behavior, social media evidence establishing bias. Document everything. Make sure our legal position is airtight. He began pacing, his mind working through the strategy like a chess grandmaster planning 15 moves ahead. Second, I want a comprehensive review of every passenger complaint filed in the past 10 years. Every single one. Assign a team. I want to know if we have other employees like Hammond flying under the radar. That's thousands of complaints, Simon said. It'll take months. Then it takes months. Start immediately. Prioritize complaints involving discrimination or bias. Third, mandatory anti-bias training for all flight crew. And I mean mandatory. You miss it, you're terminated. No exceptions. I don't care if you've been flying for 40 years. You complete the training or you find another airline. Loretta nodded approval. That's defensible legally and sends a strong message. Fourth, create an independent passenger advocacy office. Direct reporting to this executive team. No more burying complaints in HR, passengers need to know someone is actually listening. Fifth, reach out to every passenger who filed a complaint against Hammond. Every single one. Offer formal apologies on behalf of the airline. Offer compensation. Make it right. Simon was writing frantically. That's going to cost significant money. I don't care. They deserved better. We failed them. We make it right. Andre stopped pacing and placed both hands on the table, leaning forward. And finally, I want to meet with Hammond. Face to face. Gerald looked alarmed. Andre, I don't think that's wise. Let legal handle the termination. I'm not terminating him. Not yet. The room went silent. Everyone stared at Andre in confusion. You're not firing him? Loretta's voice carried disbelief. Not yet. I want him to understand exactly what he did and why it was wrong. I want him to see the face of the person he discriminated against and understand that actions have consequences. More importantly, I want to give him a choice. What kind of choice? Simon asked carefully. Andre's expression was unreadable. That's between Hammond and me. Set up the meeting for tomorrow morning. 10 a.m. This conference room. Just him and me, though Loretta, I want you present as a witness. The team exchanged uncertain glances, but nobody argued. When Andre Washington made a decision with that tone of voice, debate was over. One more thing, Andre added. Track down the graduate student who gave up her window seat for Zoe. Whitney Hayes, Georgia Tech Computer Science PhD program. I want to make sure she gets interview opportunities at every company in our portfolio when she graduates. Gerald smiled slightly. Already done. I have her contact information and a note to schedule an informational interview. Good. Andre checked his watch. 6:15 p.m. The board meeting is in 45 minutes. I need everyone ready to present these findings. We're overhauling this airline's entire approach to discrimination complaints, and it starts tonight. The Skirich Pilot Lounge occupied a quiet corner of the Atlanta airport's crew facilities. Comfortable chairs, flight planning computers, coffee that was actually drinkable. Pilots between flights gathered here to rest, complete paperwork, and swap stories. Captain Roger Hammond sat in his usual chair, surrounded by 3 fellow pilots, regaling them with his version of that morning's events. In his telling, he'd been firm but fair with a passenger who'd clearly been trying to exploit the system. So this guy boards with a kid, wearing a ratty college hoodie and jeans with holes in them, trying to sit in first class. I mean, come on. You develop instincts in this job. You know who belongs where. Hammond laughed, taking a sip of coffee. I handled it professionally, moved him to economy where he should have been in the first place, and that was that. Two of the pilots chuckled uncertainly. The third, Captain Lisa Monroe, didn't join in. At 38, Lisa had been with Skirich for 10 years. As one of the few black female pilots in commercial aviation, she'd developed finely tuned radar for discrimination disguised as operational decisions. "Roger," she said carefully, "did you actually verify there was something wrong with his tickets? Or did you just assume?" Hammond waved dismissively. "Didn't need to verify anything. Sometimes you just know. It's not about race, it's about maintaining standards. First class is for people who've earned it, who understand the culture of premium travel." This guy clearly didn't fit. Lisa's expression turned to stone. She stood abruptly. "I need to file my flight plan." As she walked away, Hammond shook his head. "See? That's the problem with this industry now. Everything's so politically correct. You can't even do your job without someone getting offended." His phone buzzed. An email notification. Hammond glanced at the screen and his casual smile faded. From Human Resources, Skirich Airlines. Subject, Immediate required meeting. Captain Hammond, report to conference room C at airport headquarters immediately. Bring your union representative. This is mandatory and time-sensitive. Hammond's stomach dropped. Mandatory meetings with HR were never good news. He tried to remember if he'd made any procedural errors recently. He'd had that minor disagreement with a gate agent last week, but nothing serious. His flight logs were clean. His on-time performance was excellent. Maybe it was about that passenger from this morning. Had the guy actually followed through with a complaint? Hammond felt a flash of annoyance. So what if he had? Hammond's record was spotless. 28 years without a mark. The airline always backed its captains. He called his union representative, Dale Garrett, who agreed to meet him at headquarters in 20 minutes. Hammond drove there with growing irritation rather than concern. This was an inconvenience, nothing more. Conference room C was small and windowless. Simon Cross sat behind a simple table, a thick folder in front of him. Dale arrived moments after Hammond, looking confused about the sudden summons. They sat. Simon got straight to business, sliding the folder across the table. "Captain Hammond, as of this moment, you are suspended from flight duties pending a full investigation into discrimination complaints." Hammond's face flushed red. "What? This is about that passenger from this morning, isn't it? I knew he'd cause trouble. This is absolutely ridiculous. I have rights. I have a union contract." Dale opened the folder and began reading. His expression changed as he turned page after page. His jaw tightened. His eyes widened. He looked up at Hammond with something close to horror. "Roger," Dale said quietly, "this is bad." "What are you talking about?" "So some guy filed a complaint. Big deal. I've been flying for 28 years without a single disciplinary action." Simon's voice cut like ice. "You have 14 complaints filed against you in the past 5 years. All from passengers of color. All dismissed improperly by the previous HR director. That's garbage. Those weren't real complaints. Just people who didn't understand airline procedures, who got upset when they couldn't get their way." Simon turned his laptop toward Hammond. The screen displayed his Facebook posts. The memes. The rants. The comments about certain people and diversity. Hammond's face went pale. "Mr. Hammond, we have documented evidence of a pattern of discriminatory behavior. We have witness statements from this morning's incident, including video recorded by passengers. We have your social media activity establishing racial bias. We have 13 previous victims whose complaints were buried by your friend Milton Strauss." Dale was reading the complaint summaries. Black businessman questioned 3 times. Asian family accused of ticket fraud. Hispanic attorney told she didn't belong. Indian doctor's credentials questioned. On and on. Roger, Dale said, his voice heavy with disappointment, I can't defend this. I've represented pilots for 15 years. I've fought unfair terminations, protected pilots from unjust accusations. But this? This is indefensible. You discriminated against 14 passengers. You used your position of authority to humiliate people based on their race. This isn't a labor dispute. This is career suicide. Hammond felt the walls closing in. His hands trembled. I didn't mean. I wasn't. It wasn't about race. I was just doing my job. Maintaining standards. Maintaining what standards? Simon's voice remained cold. The standard that says black passengers don't belong in first class. That Asian families must have fraudulent tickets. That Hispanic professionals should be questioned and humiliated. No. I have instincts. You develop them over years of flying. You learn to spot potential problems. Problems? Mr. Hammond, every single complaint came from a person of color. Every single one. Your instincts are racial profiling. The room spun. Hammond tried to speak but couldn't form coherent words. This couldn't be happening. 28 years. His pension. His reputation. His family's financial security. Simon pulled up another image on his laptop. Andre's official biography. Founder and CEO of Washington Capital Group. Principal owner of Skirich Airlines. Net worth, $8 billion. Hammond stared at the screen, not understanding at first. Then Simon advanced to a photo. Andre in a business suit at a shareholder meeting. Recognition hit Hammond like a physical blow. The blood drained from his face. His coffee cup slipped from his hand, spilling across the table. That can't be, no. The passenger you forcibly removed from first class this morning, Simon said quietly, is Andre Washington. He owns 70% of this airline. He's the person responsible for your pay raise last year. For the new aircraft in our fleet. For the improved benefits package that saved your pension. And you discriminated against him and his 4-year-old daughter because you decided, based purely on their appearance, that they didn't belong in first class. Dale closed the folder and stood. Roger, I'm withdrawing as your representative. The union can assign someone else if you want, but I'm telling you right now, nobody's going to be able to help you. You discriminated against the company owner. On camera. With multiple witnesses. You're done. Hammond couldn't breathe. The room tilted. He gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling out of his chair. I didn't know, he whispered. How was I supposed to know? He was dressed like, he looked like. Like what? Simon finished coldly. Like a black man. That's exactly the point, Mr. Hammond. You made assumptions based purely on race. If anything, not knowing Mr. Washington's wealth makes it worse. It proves you would have discriminated against any black passenger, regardless of who they were. Hammond's mind raced desperately. His career. His family. Everything. Please. Let me apologize. I'll apologize to him directly. I'll do anything. Please. I didn't mean for this to happen. You'll have the opportunity to explain your actions to Mr. Washington directly, Simon said. He's requested a meeting. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., corporate headquarters. Be there. Simon gathered his materials and stood. You're suspended indefinitely. Turn in your flight credentials to security on your way out. You'll be notified of our final decision after you meet with Mr. Washington. Hammond stumbled out of the conference room in a daze. Dale left without another word. As Hammond wandered through the terminal toward the exit, he passed Lisa Monroe completing her pre-flight check. She looked at him with an expression that combined pity and vindication. "I hope it was worth it, Roger." He couldn't respond. He just kept walking, his entire world crumbling with each step. Hammond arrived at Skirich headquarters at 9:30 a.m., a full 30 minutes early. He hadn't slept. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. Sweat stained his shirt despite the cool morning air. His hands shook as he signed in at the security desk. His wife had cried most of the night. Their mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks. Their daughter was starting college in the fall. Everything depended on his salary and his pension. If he lost this job, lost everything, how would they survive? He tried calling Dale back, begging him to reconsider representing him. Dale had been blunt. "Roger, you're toxic. Nobody in the union wants to touch this. You discriminated against a billionaire on camera. You're a PR nightmare. Even if I wanted to help you, there's nothing I can do. Show up tomorrow, grovel, and pray he doesn't destroy you completely." Now Hammond sat in a waiting area outside the conference room, watching the clock tick toward 10 a.m. Each minute felt like an hour. Other executives passed by, their expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. Everyone knew. Everyone had heard. At exactly 10 a.m., the conference room door opened. Loretta Hayes stood there, her expression professionally neutral. "Captain Hammond. Please come in." Hammond's legs barely supported him as he walked into the room. It was large, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Atlanta's skyline. A long table dominated the center. And at the head of that table sat Andre Washington. Hammond barely recognized him. Gone was the tired father in a hoodie. Andre wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, burgundy tie. He looked like what he was, a billionaire executive who controlled Hammond's entire future. His expression was unreadable, calm but intense, like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict. Loretta gestured to a chair across from Andre. Hammond sat, feeling like a child called to the principal's office. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Andre simply looked at him, studying him, saying nothing. Hammond broke first. The words tumbled out desperately. "Mr. Washington, I'm so sorry. I'm incredibly sorry. If I had known who you were, I never would have." "Stop." Andre's voice cut through Hammond's babbling like a knife. The single word carried so much authority that Hammond's mouth snapped shut. "Stop right there. If you had known who I was. That's your defense? That you wouldn't discriminate against a billionaire, but a regular black father and his daughter are fair game?" Hammond floundered, trying to backtrack. "No, I didn't mean it like that. I just meant that I made a terrible mistake, and if I'd understood the situation better." "You understood the situation perfectly, Captain Hammond. You saw a black man and a black child. You made a decision in approximately 10 seconds that we didn't belong in first class. You didn't check for problems with our tickets. You didn't receive any operational directive. You simply decided, based on nothing but the color of our skin, that we needed to be removed. Am I wrong?" Silence. Hammond couldn't meet Andre's eyes. Andre leaned forward, his voice dropping but losing none of its intensity. "Let me tell you about my morning yesterday, Captain Hammond. I woke up at 5 a.m. I made my daughter breakfast. Pancakes shaped like butterflies because that makes her laugh. I carefully packed her favorite stuffed animal because she can't sleep without it. I dressed her in the purple dress she loves. Do you know why we were flying to Atlanta?" Hammond shook his head mutely. "To visit her great-aunt Pearl. My grandmother's sister. She's 90 years old. My daughter needs to know her family history, understand where she comes from. My grandmother raised me after my mother died. She cleaned office buildings at night so I could have school supplies. She never lived to see me succeed. But Aunt Pearl did, and I want Zoe to know her. Andre paused, letting the humanity of the situation sink in. This wasn't about a billionaire being inconvenienced. This was about a father and daughter on a family trip. I paid $2,400 for those first-class tickets. Not because I needed to prove I could afford them. Not to show off. Because I wanted my 4-year-old daughter to be comfortable. Because the seats recline and she could sleep. Because I could give her that small comfort. And you decided, in 10 seconds, that we didn't deserve it. Why? Hammond's voice cracked. I made a terrible mistake. No. A mistake is pressing the wrong button, taking a wrong turn. What you did was make a calculated decision based on prejudice. You saw our skin color and made assumptions about our worth, our class, our right to occupy space in a premium cabin. You profiled us. Am I wrong? Tears streamed down Hammond's face now. He couldn't answer because there was no answer that would make this better. Andre's voice softened slightly, but the steel remained underneath. Do you know what my daughter asked me when we sat down in economy? She asked if we moved because we did something wrong. She's 4 years old, Captain Hammond. 4. And because of you, she now associates being black with being punished, with being told she doesn't belong somewhere. Do you understand the damage you've done? Not just to me, but to a child. Please, Hammond whispered. Mr. Washington, please. I have a family. I've worked for this airline my whole adult life. I'll do anything. Sensitivity training, community service, public apology, anything. Please don't take everything away. Loretta slid a document across the table. These are summaries of the 14 other passengers who complained about you over the past 5 years. Would you like to read their stories? Hammond looked at the pages with growing horror. He saw patterns he'd never noticed before, or maybe he'd noticed but never cared. A young black mother accused of not being able to afford her ticket. An Asian American businessman questioned about whether his luxury watch was real. A Hispanic family separated because Hammond decided their first-class tickets must have been a system error. For the first time, Hammond saw himself clearly. Not as a professional maintaining standards. As a racist using his authority to humiliate people who looked different from him. I'm not firing you, Captain Hammond. Hammond's head snapped up, hope flooding his face so suddenly it was almost painful to watch. Andre stood, walking to the window. I'm doing something much harder. You're going to keep your job, but under specific conditions. Hammond blinked, confused. This wasn't what he'd expected. Andre turned back to face him. You will complete 300 hours of diversity and inclusion training. Real training, not watching videos and checking boxes. You will work with experts who specialize in addressing implicit bias. You will learn the history of discrimination in aviation, in America, in every system you've benefited from your entire life. Loretta produced another document. You will personally apologize to every passenger on that list. Face to face when possible, written letters when not. You will explain what you did wrong and what you're doing to change. Andre continued. You will volunteer 200 hours at community centers in predominantly black neighborhoods. You will teach aviation to kids who dream of flying but never see pilots who look like them. You will open doors you've spent your career keeping closed. Hammond struggled to process this. It wasn't immediate termination, but it also wasn't mercy. And every month, Andre said, his voice taking on an edge, you will write a detailed report about what you've learned. Those reports will be published in a company newsletter with your name attached. Every employee, every passenger who wants to read them, will see your journey from ignorant bigot to decent human being. Or they'll watch you fail trying. Loretta added, if you complete this program successfully, you keep your pension and benefits. If you refuse any component, or if you fail to meet the standards, you're terminated for cause and lose everything. Hammond realized the genius and the cruelty of it simultaneously. Andre wasn't letting him quietly disappear into retirement with his pension intact. He wasn't allowing him the dignity of a private resignation. He was making Hammond confront every ugly assumption, every act of discrimination, in the most public way possible. It was accountability without escape. Why? Hammond whispered, his voice breaking. Why not just fire me? Why make me go through this? Andre walked back to the table and sat down, looking Hammond directly in the eyes. Because my grandmother used to say, don't throw away a person who can still learn to be better. She believed in redemption, in second chances earned through genuine change. I didn't build an $8 billion fortune by discarding assets that could be reformed and made useful. He paused. You have 28 years of knowledge and experience. You understand aviation. You could be valuable. But you also have poison in your thinking, prejudices that have hurt people for years. I'm giving you the choice to keep the knowledge and excise the poison. Or you can refuse, in which case we part ways immediately. Andre stood and walked toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. Captain Hammond, 20 years from now, I want my daughter to live in a world where she never has to question whether she belongs somewhere because of her skin color. You're going to help build that world, or you're going to get out of the way. You have 24 hours to decide. Choose wisely. The door closed behind him, leaving Hammond alone with Loretta and the stack of documents outlining his punishment or his redemption, depending on how he chose to view it. Loretta's expression softened marginally. Mr. Hammond, I've prosecuted hate crimes. I've seen real evil. You're not evil. You're ignorant, which is fixable. But only if you genuinely want to fix it. If you take this program seriously, if you actually learn and change, you could do tremendous good. If you just go through the motions to keep your pension, everyone will know. The choice is yours. She stood to leave, then added, for what it's worth, I hope you choose to be better. Those kids in those community centers deserve to see that people can change. So does your own family. Hammond sat alone in the conference room for 20 minutes after she left, staring at the documents, at the list of people he'd harmed, at the outline of a program designed to completely transform who he was. Finally, he picked up a pen and signed the agreement. Not because he fully understood it yet. Not because he'd suddenly become enlightened. But because he had no other choice, and maybe, just maybe, there was a chance he could become someone his children wouldn't be ashamed of. 2 weeks passed. Hammond's suspension became company-wide news through internal communications. Andre authorized a carefully worded press release that didn't name Hammond specifically but announced sweeping policy changes at Skirich Airlines. The aviation industry press erupted immediately. Headlines dominated trade publications and mainstream media alike. Tech billionaire overhauls airline after discrimination experience. Skirich Airlines implements industry's strictest anti-bias policies. Andre Washington takes on aviation's hidden bias problem. Andre granted exactly one interview, specifically to a black-owned media outlet called Elevation Media. He sat in their Atlanta studio, Zoe on his lap, and explained his vision calmly and clearly. The reporter, a sharp woman named Kennedy Harris, asked the obvious question. Mr. Washington, you could have simply fired the pilot and moved on. Why this elaborate rehabilitation program? Andre looked directly into the camera. Because firing one person doesn't fix a broken system. Captain Hammond is a symptom, not the disease. The disease is institutional acceptance of discrimination. It's HR departments that bury complaints. It's colleagues who stay silent. It's a culture that protects the powerful and dismisses the vulnerable. If I just fire Hammond, the system finds another Hammond to protect. So this is about more than one incident on one flight. This is about every child who's ever been made to feel they don't belong somewhere because of how they look. I'm not doing this because I'm a billionaire. I'm doing this because I'm a father. Andre hugged Zoe closer. Every child, regardless of color, deserves to move through the world without being prejudged. And every adult has a responsibility to make that world real. The clip went viral within hours. Millions of views across social media platforms. Thousands of people shared their own stories of discrimination while traveling. A hashtag emerged, #belonging in transit. The stories poured in. A black doctor forced to prove her credentials 3 times before being allowed to help during a medical emergency. An Asian American family separated because a gate agent didn't believe they were actually related. A Hispanic businessman told to move from business class because another passenger felt uncomfortable. Other airlines scrambled to review their own policies, terrified of similar exposure. 3 major carriers announced new anti-discrimination training within days. The industry conversation shifted dramatically. At Skirich headquarters, Simon Cross's newly created passenger advocacy office was overwhelmed with complaints that had been previously dismissed or never filed because people assumed nobody would listen. Each one received thorough investigation. The review process uncovered systemic problems. 3 additional pilots were suspended for discrimination patterns. 2 gate agents were terminated for racial profiling. A regional manager who'd buried complaints for 6 years was forced to resign. But alongside the reckonings came hope and investment in change. Andre personally funded a $5 million scholarship program for aspiring pilots from underrepresented communities. 10 full-ride packages covering flight school, certifications, everything needed to become a commercial pilot. Applications flooded in. Among them, a letter from a 17-year-old girl in Detroit named Jasmine Moore stopped Andre in his tracks. Dear Mr. Washington, I've dreamed of being a pilot since I was 6 years old and watched planes fly over my neighborhood. But I never saw anyone who looked like me in the cockpit. Every pilot was a white man. I started to believe maybe that dream wasn't for girls like me. Then I saw your interview. I saw what you're doing. And now I believe again. Thank you for making me believe I can fly. Andre had the letter framed and hung in his office, directly across from his desk where he'd see it every day. Meanwhile, Hammond began his mandatory training. The first session was brutal. He sat in a conference room with 20 other Skirich employees flagged for bias issues, watching video after video of passengers sharing their experiences of discrimination. One video showed a black woman in her 60s describing how she'd been followed through an airport store by security while white shoppers browsed freely. Another showed a Latino man explaining how gate agents questioned his ticket's legitimacy 4 times while white passengers boarded without question. Hammond watched himself reflected in every story. The casual assumptions. The microaggressions. The use of authority to humiliate people who'd done nothing wrong. The facilitator, a professor of social psychology named Dr. Raymond Bell, didn't let anyone hide from discomfort. Discrimination isn't always burning crosses and shouting slurs, Dr. Bell explained. It's the 1,000 small decisions we make based on unconscious bias. It's seeing someone and making assumptions about their wealth, their education, their right to occupy certain spaces. It's death by 1,000 cuts, and the people wielding the knives often don't even realize they're cutting. Hammond felt sick. For 28 years, he'd been cutting people and calling it professionalism. His volunteer work began at the Westside Community Center, located in South Atlanta just blocks from where Andre had grown up. The program director, a no-nonsense woman named Miss Carroll, made her expectations clear from the start. I don't care about your problems. I don't care about your redemption arc. These kids deserve better than to be your therapy project. You show up on time, you show up prepared, and you treat these children with respect. If you're here for any reason other than genuinely wanting to help them, don't bother coming back. Hammond showed up every Tuesday and Thursday evening. At first, the kids were suspicious. What was this white pilot doing here? Why should they trust him? He started with paper airplanes, teaching basic aerodynamics. He brought models showing how engines worked. Slowly, cautiously, some kids engaged. They asked questions. They tested their designs against his. One evening, a 9-year-old boy named Timothy looked up at Hammond with serious eyes. "Mr. Hammond, can black people be pilots?" The question shattered something in Hammond's chest. This child, brilliant and curious and full of potential, had to ask if someone who looked like him was allowed to dream of flying. Hammond knelt down to Timothy's level. "Yes. Absolutely yes. And you can be one too. Let me show you exactly how." He started bringing college brochures, information about flight schools, stories of black aviation pioneers like Bessie Coleman and the Tuskegee Airmen. He realized these kids didn't just need to know they could become pilots. They needed to see the pathway, understand the steps, believe it was actually possible. His monthly reports to the company started awkwardly, full of corporate speak and defensive justifications. But by the third month, something shifted. He wrote, "I used to think I wasn't racist because I never used slurs or burned crosses. I thought racism was only the big, obvious acts of violence and hatred. But racism is also the 1,000 small assumptions. It's seeing a black man in casual clothes and deciding he doesn't belong in first class. It's never questioning why all my friends look exactly like me. It's benefiting from systems that protect people like me while punishing people like Mr. Washington simply for existing in spaces I deemed ours. I was racist. I am actively working to be better. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm committing to change." The report was published in the company newsletter. Reactions were mixed. Some employees dismissed it as performative, a desperate attempt to save his career. But others, particularly younger staff members, started their own conversations about biases they'd witnessed or participated in without recognizing them. Lisa Monroe, the black pilot who'd questioned Hammond originally, was promoted to chief pilot. In her new role, she implemented comprehensive mentorship programs pairing experienced pilots with new recruits from underrepresented backgrounds. She created support systems so pilots of color didn't face the isolation she'd experienced early in her career. The culture at Skirich began to shift. Slowly. Imperfectly. But noticeably. Discrimination complaints were taken seriously. Investigations were thorough. Consequences were real. 6 months after the incident, the airline won recognition from 3 civil rights organizations for its transformation efforts. The recognition came with skepticism. Let's see if this lasts when the media attention fades. Andre understood the skepticism. Real change took years, decades, constant vigilance. But at least now they were building the foundation. 6 months and 1 week after that morning flight, Hammond completed his required 300 hours of training. He'd fulfilled his 200 volunteer hours. He'd written and delivered personal apologies to all 14 passengers from the complaint list. Most had hung up on him. A few accepted his apologies with skepticism. 3 told him they appreciated his effort but couldn't forgive him yet, maybe never. 1, an elderly black woman named Ruth Patterson, told him something that would haunt him in the best possible way. "Young man, I don't forgive you for me. I'm 83 years old. I've survived worse than your ignorance. I forgive you so you can be better for the next person who needs you to be. Don't waste my forgiveness." Those words became Hammond's private mantra. Andre called him to headquarters for a final evaluation meeting. Hammond arrived expecting judgment, perhaps termination despite completing the program. Instead, he found Andre alone in a conference room, 2 chairs facing each other, no executives, no lawyers, just the 2 of them. "Sit down, Captain Hammond." Hammond sat, his heart pounding. Andre slid a folder across the table. "You've completed the program. Technically, I could reinstate you to full flight status. You've met every requirement. But I have a different proposal." Inside the folder was a job description. Director of Diversity and Inclusion for Flight Operations. The role would oversee training for all pilots, develop curriculum, investigate discrimination complaints, report directly to the executive board. Hammond stared at the description, confused. You trust me with this? Trust is earned through demonstrated change. You've started earning it. But this isn't about trust. It's about utilizing someone who's learned hard lessons to teach others. You've seen both sides now. The person who discriminates and the process of unlearning that discrimination. Use that knowledge. Hammond read through the responsibilities. Developing anti-bias training. Mentoring pilots from underrepresented backgrounds. Creating accountability systems. It was meaningful work. Challenging work. Work that mattered. It's a pay cut from pilot's salary, Andre continued. About $40,000 less per year. But you'd be home every night with your family. You'd be making real, lasting change instead of just flying routes. Hammond thought about Timothy and the other kids at the community center. About Ruth Patterson's challenge not to waste her forgiveness. About his own daughter, who told him last week that he seemed different, lighter somehow, like a weight had lifted. I accept, Hammond said. But I have one condition. Andre raised an eyebrow, surprised. I want to issue a public apology. To you and Zoe. Personally. Not through lawyers or press releases. I want to look you both in the eye and own what I did. Not for my redemption. Because you deserve to hear it, and because other people need to see that accountability looks like facing the people you've harmed. Andre considered this carefully. It was risky. Opening old wounds publicly. But it was also exactly what real accountability looked like. Zoe doesn't need adult apologies, Andre said finally. She needs to see that people can change. If you want to apologize to her, do it by being someone she can respect. Show her through your actions in this job that people can grow beyond their worst moments. Hammond nodded, understanding. And you? I don't need your apology, Captain Hammond. I need your commitment. Commit to this work. Commit to making sure what happened to me and my daughter never happens to another family. That's the apology that matters. They shook hands. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't absolution. It was something more complicated and more real, two men trying to build something better from the wreckage of a terrible moment, acknowledging that redemption was a process, not a destination. 1 year and 2 months after the incident that changed everything, Skirich Airline stood on stage at the National Transportation Diversity Summit, accepting an award for outstanding progress in workplace equity. Andre Washington walked to the podium in a sharp gray suit, but he didn't accept the award alone. Roger Hammond stood beside him, wearing the Director of Diversity badge that had replaced his captain's wings. The audience of transportation industry leaders watched with curiosity and skepticism. They knew the backstory. Everyone did. Andre spoke first, his voice carrying across the convention hall. This award recognizes progress, not perfection. A year ago, this airline failed one of our passengers in the worst possible way. That passenger happened to be me. But I was just one in a long line of people who'd been failed by systems that protected prejudice instead of people. He paused, letting his words sink in. This man standing next to me made one of the worst mistakes of his professional life with me and my daughter. He could have been fired, forgotten, erased. Instead, I asked him to do something much harder, change. Genuinely, publicly, painfully change. And he did. Andre stepped back, allowing Hammond to approach the microphone. Hammond's hands shook slightly as he gripped the podium. I don't expect applause for meeting basic standards of human decency, Hammond began, his voice steady despite his nerves. What I did was shameful. Discriminating against Mr. Washington and his daughter, and the 13 other passengers before them, was wrong. Period. No justifications. No excuses. Wrong. He looked out at the audience, making eye contact with as many people as possible. But Mr. Washington gave me something I absolutely didn't deserve. A chance to repair the harm I'd caused and become someone better. I hope, over the past year, I've honored that chance. I hope the kids I work with in Atlanta see that adults can learn, can grow, can be better than their worst moments. The applause was polite but measured. The industry remained skeptical, and Hammond understood why. Talk was easy. Sustained change was hard. The real story wasn't happening on stage. It was happening in airports across the country, in training sessions and complaint investigations, in the slow, difficult work of cultural transformation. Discrimination complaints at Skirich had dropped by 73%. Pilot diversity had increased by 41%. The airline had become the employer of choice for aviation professionals of color, who now had confidence that complaints would be heard and addressed. Whitney Hayes, the graduate student who'd given up her window seat for Zoe that terrible morning, now worked as a junior product manager at one of Andre's portfolio companies. She led a team developing AI ethics frameworks, ensuring technology served everyone equitably. Lisa Monroe had transformed flight operations culture through mentorship and accountability. Young pilots of color had support systems, role models, pathways to advancement that hadn't existed before. Hammond's community center work had expanded. The West Side program now hosted 60 kids every week. 5 alumni had received Skirich Flight School scholarships. Timothy, the 9-year-old who'd asked if black people could be pilots, had completed an aviation summer camp and announced his intention to attend the Air Force Academy. Ruth Patterson, the elderly woman who'd forgiven Hammond, had passed away 3 months ago. But before she died, she'd written Hammond a final letter. "You kept your word. You became better. My grandson Isaiah is in flight school now because of programs you helped create. He believes he belongs in the sky because you showed him pilots can be better than their prejudices. Thank you for not wasting my forgiveness." Hammond kept that letter in his office, reading it whenever the work felt overwhelming. Andre stood at his office window now, watching planes take off from Hartsfield-Jackson, each one carrying hundreds of passengers who might never know how close the industry came to ignoring systematic discrimination yet again. Zoe was in first grade. She wanted to be a pilot when she grew up, inspired not by Hammond's redemption story but by Captain Lisa Monroe, who'd visited her class and told the kids they could fly anywhere they dreamed. That was exactly as it should be. Children's dreams shouldn't be built on adult redemption arcs. They should be built on seeing possibility reflected in people who looked like them. His phone buzzed. A text from Whitney: "Mr. Washington, our AI ethics framework just got adopted by 3 more tech companies. Thank you for seeing potential in me when I was just a stranger on a plane willing to give up a window seat." Andre smiled. That was the real story. Not one confrontation, not one transformation. The ripple effects. The students mentored. The policies changed. The children who'd grow up in a slightly better world because adults chose accountability over comfort. His assistant knocked. "Mr. Washington, there's someone here to see you. She says it's personal." An elderly black woman entered, moving carefully with a cane. She introduced herself as Ruth Patterson's sister, Helen. "Mr. Washington, my sister talked about you constantly before she passed. About what you did, how you handled that pilot. She wanted you to have this." Helen handed him a small framed photograph. Ruth as a young woman in the 1960s, standing in front of an airport, dressed in her finest clothes, carrying a suitcase. On the back, Ruth had written, "First time I flew. First time I wasn't told to use a separate entrance. First time I felt like I belonged. Never stopped fighting so others would feel the same. Keep fighting." Andre's eyes welled up. He thought about his grandmother, Miss Lorraine, who'd never lived to see him successful. About Simone, who'd never watched Zoe grow up. About all the people who'd fought battles so he could sit in first class without question, who'd paved paths he now walked freely. "Would you like some tea?" Andre asked Helen. "I'd love to hear more about your sister." They talked for 2 hours. Helen shared stories of traveling during segregation, of indignities large and small, of persistence and dignity in the face of systematic dehumanization. "What you did," Helen said as she prepared to leave, refusing to just fire that pilot, making him face what he'd done and learn from it, that took more courage than revenge would have. Easier to destroy than to build. But building is what changes the world. After she left, Andre picked up the framed photo of Zoe in a cockpit, the picture Lisa Monroe had taken. On the back, in crayon, Zoe had written, "When I grow up, I'm going to fly everyone everywhere, and nobody will ever be told they don't belong." His phone rang. Another airline CEO, calling to ask if Andre would consult on their diversity programs. He was becoming known not just as a tech billionaire but as a force for institutional change across industries. He considered the request carefully, thinking about the work still needed at Skirich, the program still developing, the cultural transformation that required constant attention. "Tell them I'll consider it," Andre told his assistant. "But my terms are non-negotiable. Real change, real accountability, measurable results, or I walk. And make sure they understand that real change takes years, not quarters. It requires investing in people, not just policies. It means uncomfortable conversations and genuine consequences. If they're not ready for that, they're wasting both our time." That evening, Andre picked up Zoe from school. She bounced out clutching a drawing of an airplane with "Captain Zoe" written across the top in purple marker. "Daddy, look what I made. Miss Lisa said I can visit the cockpit next time we fly. She's going to show me all the controls." Andre knelt down, looking at his daughter's excited face. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Did you know that when Grandma Lorraine's sister was your age, she wasn't allowed to even sit in certain parts of planes?" Zoe's face scrunched in confusion. "Why not?" "Because some people made unfair rules based on skin color. But brave people fought to change those rules so kids like you could grow up without those limits. That's silly. Skin color doesn't matter for flying planes." Andre hugged her tightly, overwhelmed by the simple, perfect clarity of childhood logic unspoiled by prejudice. "You're absolutely right, baby. It doesn't matter at all." As they drove home through Atlanta traffic, Zoe chattered about her day, about the book she was reading, about her friend's upcoming birthday party. Normal kid stuff. Beautiful, mundane, precious normal life. Andre realized something profound: he hadn't bought that airline to make money. He'd never confronted Hammond to punish him. Every decision, every difficult conversation, every policy change, all of it was for this moment. For the possibility that his daughter might grow up in a world incrementally better than the one he'd inherited. The fight wasn't over. It never would be. Prejudice didn't disappear because one pilot completed sensitivity training or one airline updated policies. Systemic change required persistent, exhausting, never-ending work. But tonight, driving through his hometown with his daughter singing in the back seat, Andre Washington allowed himself to believe that change, real transformative change, was possible. One flight at a time. One conversation at a time. One transformed heart at a time. The plane that had carried them that terrible morning was probably in the air right now, carrying new passengers to new destinations. Maybe some of them were sitting in first class for the first time, nervous about whether they belonged, watching for signs they weren't welcome. Andre hoped they'd find something different than what he'd found a year ago. He hoped they'd find attendants who smiled genuinely. Pilots who saw passengers as people, not stereotypes. Systems that protected everyone equally. He hoped they'd find belonging. Because belonging wasn't about wealth or status. It was about basic human dignity. The right to move through the world without constantly defending your existence. The right to sit in a seat you paid for without justifying why you deserved it. The right to dream without someone deciding your dreams were too ambitious for someone who looked like you. Ruth Patterson had fought for that belonging. His grandmother had cleaned floors so he could access it. Simone had died, bringing Zoe into a world where she might fully experience it. The work continued. The fight persisted. But progress was real, measurable, worth everything it cost. So what do you think? Should all airlines adopt policies like Andre's? Do you believe people like Captain Hammond deserve second chances? Comment below and let me know your thoughts. And if this story moved you, if it made you think differently about discrimination and redemption, hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel because stories like this remind us that change is possible when we have the courage to demand it and the wisdom to build it right. Thank you for watching, and remember, you belong wherever you have the courage to go. Never let anyone tell you different. See you in the next story. This story teaches us that true power isn't about revenge, it's about transformation. Andre Washington could have destroyed Captain Hammond with a single phone call, but instead he chose the harder path, forcing accountability while creating opportunity for genuine change. The lesson here cuts deep. Racism isn't always burning crosses and hate speech. It's the casual assumptions we make about who belongs where based on skin color. It's the instincts we trust without examining their roots in prejudice. Hammond spent 28 years believing his discrimination was professionalism, his bias was experience. Only when forced to confront the faces of those he'd harmed did he begin to see the truth. But this story also shows that systems matter more than individuals. 14 passengers complained before Andre, and all were silenced by institutional protection of the status quo. Real change requires dismantling those protective systems, creating accountability structures that can't be bypassed by friendship or convenience. The most powerful lesson. Our children are watching. Zoe learned that her skin color might make others question her belonging, but she also learned that speaking up changes systems. She saw her father turn humiliation into transformation. That's the legacy that matters. Teaching the next generation that dignity isn't negotiable and change, though difficult, is always possible when we refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. What would you have done in Andre's position? Would you have fired Hammond immediately, or do you believe in second chances even for those who've caused real harm? Drop a comment below and let's have this important conversation. If you think more companies need leaders willing to prioritize justice over convenience, smash that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that standing up against discrimination matters, even when it's uncomfortable. And don't forget to subscribe because we're committed to bringing you stories that challenge us to be better, to build fairer systems, to create a world where no child ever has to ask if they belong. Thank you for watching and for being part of a community that believes in accountability, transformation, and the hard work of making our world more just. Remember, your voice matters, your actions create ripples, and belonging is a right, not a privilege. Until next time, keep fighting for what's right, keep believing in people's capacity to change, and keep building the world you want to see. See you in the next story.